Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings throughout the universe. I'm Dustin Cron, the founder of the Center for Global Muslim Life, and we're really blessed to be here with our sister Ghazala Salam from the Muslim Caucus, and we have an amazing set of programs over the next 5 days leading into the 2020 election, talking about what really is an American Muslim political agenda look like post this election, no matter what happens, and into 2021. So Ghazala, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Dustin. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. We're so excited to bring you this live forum series for the next 5 days until the day of election. Each night, we're going to unpack different issues that impact the American Muslim community along with the broader population in our nation. These are some of the issues that will not go away regardless of who wins the election on November 3rd. So our goal basically is to organize around these issues that impact our communities after November 3rd and mobilize our communities to advocate for the issues that impact our daily lives. So with that, I want to thank Jetpac also, who is a collaborator with us on this. So Center for Global Muslim Life, the Muslim Caucus Education Collective, and Jetpac have partnered to bring you this series for the next 5 days. We're really excited today to introduce you to the first series of conversation, which is on poverty and the pandemic, and the Muslim community's response, especially during and after this during this pandemic, because it's obviously still not over. Poverty, wealth inequality, and how it impacts American Muslims, and how poverty and climate change are inextricably linked. This is one of the conversations that we don't really have. 40% of American Muslims report household incomes of below $30,000 per year. And in comparison to the overall US population, which is 32%. So there is definitely poverty in our community. American Muslims are highly impacted by that. And so we want to have a conversation around those things. We have an amazing group of panelists who work in their own spaces as community organizers and leaders, addressing poverty issues in their communities. So the first person that I would like to bring on is Umar Hakeem. He is a community organizer. He works with Intellect, Love, Mercy ILM Foundation. He has been serving the general public in Southern California and works on the issues of poverty. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum, Hakeem Omar.
Alaikum assalam, rahmatullah. How you doing?
Good, good. I want to just share with each panelist that you have 5 minutes. Okay. I will come back again if you're running over, but you have 5 minutes because we have a lot of speakers and we want to get everything into the hour. So please tell us about your work and what you do.
Okay, well, assalamu alaikum, virtual world. My name is Umar Hakeem Day. I am the consulting director for Intellect, Love, and Mercy Foundation in Los Angeles, founded in 1998. Our mission is teaching life skills to replace social ills, and our methodology to deliver this will be through community organizing. And as a community organizer, I'm also the board president for LA Voice. Youth development, we have a football camp with the acronym Go Beyond the Game. And game means gratitude, attitude, motivation, and education. And then we have, we do advocacy for the homeless, which is our biggest program called Humanitarian Day, which is a 20-year program that's been established here in the Los Angeles, the longest going effort during the month of Ramadan. And our motto for that is basically convert charity into awareness, advocacy, and action. This past March, our lives changed. And it changed because we was told to stay safe at home. And in this stay at home, it changed a lot of our programs. So this magic word that everybody came up with is called pivot. Everybody had to pivot. So everybody had to go into pivoting their programs into something virtual and or something that's where you can't touch each other, be social distancing. So I just got back on a trip from Belgium, and I gave a talk at the Red Cross. And I said, we got to let this opportunity transform us and changes so we can exit out of pandemic different how we entered it. So though Humanitarian Day was scheduled for Ramadan, we couldn't do it. But what this pandemic did for us is all the trainings, all the networking, everything that came before the pandemic, we did not have to organize out of urgency. All those trainings, all those network partners, all the community partners, civic relationships came into play. So when Eric Garcetti's, the Los Angeles mayor, Eric Garcetti called us, they said like, Umar or Elm Foundation, we got a project that we would like to do. So we said, what's the project? Well, we got so many porta potty hygiene stations put out around Skid Row. Skid Row is our target area in downtown Los Angeles. And we said, we need individuals to observe and report the condition of these stations. I said, perfect. Let us dig into our network, because if you're going to be doing this work, you got to be connected to the grassroots of the community. So we dug into we was already developing what you call the Skid Row Brigade. And the Skid Row Brigade is known as the greatest volunteers on Skid Row, men, women who volunteer their time to take care of Skid Row. So we was through this partnership with the mayor's office, USEP and United Way, we was able to create 10 jobs for Skid Row residents who normally wouldn't have any work. So this opportunity allowed us to take our advocacy component of Humanitarian Day into its next frame and create jobs for those on Skid Row. So now for like 30, 40 days, we have people who are normally doing activism on Skid Row working. So if any of you are out there doing this work, look for the next levels of how to take your work into the next frame, into the next level, because it's really important. Feeding is one thing, but sustaining them, how they're going to sustain themselves, how to teach them how to fish was really important. And that made a major difference for the people on Skid Row. That made a major difference for Intellect, Love, and Mercy Foundation. That increased our relationships and also kicked in other parts of our work, such as police reform. So we're talking about a Muslim agenda. I really would like to focus on 3 sets of people: the Muslim community, the Black community, as well as the brown community here in Los Angeles, because we are greatly affected. No matter who wins the election, we still got to march forward and handle that advocacy. So we've been working on police reform. And as a result of that, with many other organizations who was at the table asking for police reform, we was able to, the mayor's office just launched a new program called Therapeutic Transportation Pilot Program, where instead of rolling out armed policemen, they're going to roll out a mental health van with unarmed facilitators trained in mental health to Skid Row and to other areas. So now our advocacy is in a whole nother frame of mind when it comes to homelessness and when it comes to nonviolent domestic calls. So we've been really working and trying to make a difference here in Los Angeles, and that may have been my 5 minutes, but you could check this, you could learn more from us at humanitarianday.com or ilmercy.com.
Thank you, Omar. Yeah, it's amazing. People just don't know, poverty is so connected to so many other issues. The increase in poverty is just going to create more disparities, and it's connected to education disparities, healthcare inequities, housing injustice, and disparities, healthcare. So everything, climate change, these are all connected. And so thank you for the wonderful work that you are doing. The next speaker that I would like to bring on is doctors. They're both doctors Murad, Nahid and Bilal Murad, who are from Minnesota. I mean, Muslims for centuries have, Muslim philanthropy, I should say, for centuries has focused on taking care of the poor and needy. And it's no different now in response to the pandemic, and especially with the homeless community and folks who are living at or below poverty. So Mr. and Mrs. Murad do amazing work through their foundation called Zakah, or Zakah Foundation. And welcome to this forum. We're so happy to have you here this evening.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you again for inviting Zakah to be on this panel. It is really a privilege for us to speak to this group. So as you heard, my name is Naheed Murad, and I am the co-founder and a board member of Zakah. That my husband here is the founder of Zakah. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the work that we do, and to start out with how Zakah came into being and how it was founded. It stands for Zakat, Aid and Charity Assisting Humanity. And founded in 2014, Zakah is a Muslim-run, community-oriented organization that is run entirely by a group of volunteers based in Minnesota. Our mission is to prevent homelessness. Our philosophy is housing first, and we feel that without safe, secure, and dignified housing, none of the other social determinants of health can be addressed. To that end, we provide emergency financial assistance by using Zakat and Sadaqah funds to our community members of Minnesota who are on the verge of homelessness. And to keep them in their homes, we provide funds for rent, for utilities, car payments, childcare, anything that can keep them employed so that they can stay within their homes. We also have a small transitional home that we operate, and it's for our Muslim sisters who are, a large number of them are victims of domestic abuse, or they are either refugees or immigrants who are experiencing homelessness, and we have them stay in our transitional home, connect them to social services and other support that they need. Again, our emphasis is that we prevent chronic homelessness, and we work alongside these sisters to try and establish financial independence so that they can go back into their homes and can restart their lives with their children and their families. Now I'm going to transition and tell you a little bit about what Zakah has been doing during the COVID pandemic. And I'll start out with a story. In early June, my older daughter called me from Powderhorn Park. That's one of the parks in Minneapolis. She had just spoken with a young Muslim woman who was no older than my daughter, and my daughter is 24, who was living in a tent at Powderhorn Park all by herself. And in the park, she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder due to a mental and physical disability that prevented her from working. She had no income and no supportive family or any place that she could go to. And this is right in the middle of a pandemic. That same night, Zakah booked a hotel room in Minneapolis for this sister. We were unable to take her in our transitional home because we had no place. She stayed in the hotel room for over a month. We helped connect her to a case manager, and we found her suitable housing. Now, most of you reading the news are aware what has been happening this summer. Minneapolis has seen an unprecedented crisis in unsheltered homelessness. Part of it is due to the COVID-19 pandemic and also to the uprising that followed the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And with decades of neglect and lack of affordable housing, there are over 1,000 people or so that are just living outside. And this summer, about 38 parks in Minneapolis have become home to encampments of predominantly our Black American and Indigenous sisters and their children and families. Since June, Zakah has spent $185,000 paying for hotel rooms for over 600 people in Minneapolis. We have done this purely as a grassroots effort. The money, the Sadaqah funds have all been raised by donations within Minnesota as well as nationally. Volunteers have mounted emergency responses, providing food, providing clothes, harm reduction supplies to hundreds of people. We have tried to connect people who are in hotels with caseworkers and social workers, and trying to just not keep people in the hotel, but give them a safe, secure, and dignified space so they can look for employment, they can look for housing, they can connect with caseworkers, and they're able to move in to their homes. And whoever is able to move in, Zakah has then provided them with first month's rent and security deposit so they can make the move. Now, I've observed in the last few years, as I've been increasingly involved in this community work, that our elected officials call this a crisis of homelessness. And it's actually not a crisis of homelessness. The way we frame the issue makes it feel that it is a problem of the people who are experiencing homelessness. It's actually a problem with our state, with us, that we cannot provide enough affordable housing. In Minnesota itself, more than 50% of the people who are unhoused, they cannot afford housing that is called affordable housing. And there's more than 50% that are actually on a wait list for public housing for over 12 months. And so where are these people supposed to go in the interim? And we know that while we don't have a system that can address homelessness, because shelters are not really a solution, and especially in the midst of a pandemic, shelters have really not remained a solution during this time. I have personally called adult shelters to try and get people in if we don't have place in our hotel program. And just as of today, I can tell you that there were only 3 or 4 beds open for women and none for single men. Even if they are available, the problem is there are so many people who cannot go to shelters because it is not safe. So just to end, I know I've spoken quite a bit, just to end, as human beings, irrespective of any variable, our fundamental role in life is to care for each other. And there is no greater objective in this life. This is what Zakah's mission is. It was established to uphold our Islamic principles, and we pray for Allah's blessing and guidance in all our endeavors. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And folks who are watching us on the live stream, please, share this on your own social media. Ask questions, like, comment, because we want this to be interactive. We want to hear from you. Please share any questions you have for any of our panelists. And I think, with that, we can bring on Mark Crane, who does a lot of work, in the Inner City Muslim Action Network in Chicago. He has done that. He's a co-founder of Empower Change. He serves the Muslim community, and he's also the project director of Dream Detroit. And he does a lot of work in terms of housing. So with that, welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And take it away.
Sure, thank you. Very grateful to be here tonight with the Center for Global Muslim Life. I'm stuck in urban mode. Center for Global Muslim Life, and with Muslim Caucus. Yes, once upon a time I did work at UMAN. That was about a decade ago. To be clear, I'm not there anymore. Dream of Detroit, as Ghazala mentioned, is where I serve as the executive director. I'm also active with a political action committee called Move On, where I serve as chief of member experience. But I want to spend this conversation reflecting on the work that we do at Dream, which is largely rooted in a mission of combining community organizing with community development to revitalize our neighborhood on the west side of Detroit. Alhamdulillah, I've had a chance to speak to the Center for Global Muslim Life audience before, and so I've had a chance to share some of this work. So folks can always learn more about it in depth at dreamofdetroit.org. But just to sort of sum up what we do, our work is in 3 buckets: housing, economic development, and community organizing. And so in a neighborhood here on the west side of Detroit, which is largely anchored by the Muslim Center Mosque and Community Center, it's been a pillar in this community for the last 35 years. We also have a Muslim-run free health clinic called the Huda Clinic, which has been here for about 15 years. And then you see a spattering of sort of churches, a handful of other nonprofits, a historic theater. And beyond that, we're in a neighborhood that has seen a lot of both decay and disinvestment over the years, which I'll touch on more as we talk about the pandemic's particular sort of exacerbation of that. But if you drive through our neighborhood, you'll notice a lot of gaps where houses used to be. You'll notice, not just one large empty field where a school used to be. You'll notice a lot of homes that are still well kept by folks who lived in our neighborhood for 50, 60 years, who own their homes, et cetera. And then you'll notice homes that are owned by the banks or the county or by the city or by negligent, investors that are vacant. And so our work has been to secure properties as much as we can. We've boarded up homes. We've done, countless cleanups. We've rehabbed about close to 15 homes in our neighborhood so far. We've been involved in the rehabilitation of close to 15 homes, either that we've done directly or folks who've been inspired to move into the neighborhood because of this project of rehab. But we also said at one point, when we reach sort of a tipping point with our housing work, we want to make sure that, the sort of would-be sort of Main Street commercial stretch in our area also has a chance to thrive again. And what does that look like in a 21st century American economy when, Amazon is opening up warehouses all around us, right? And so we want to be helping to figure that out. How do neighborhoods like ours continue to have thriving business economic sectors, if you will? And then the third piece is the organizing, because we had to say, we can't just continue to raise, really tens of thousands, at this point, hundreds of thousands of dollars to rehab these individual homes without being in the conversations about what has made our neighborhoods look the way that they do in the first place, right? And so in Detroit, that's a number of things. And so, we could talk, of course, about long-term population loss and sort of deindustrialization, the move of factories away from the city out to the suburbs, largely for racial reasons. People sometimes we hear about, there was more real estate there was more spaciousness for like the next era of factories. That and Black folks were breaking into the union ranks, right, and demanding fair wages and demanding fair business practices, and moving outside of the city center provided an opportunity for businesses to escape that. So you have that long history. You've got, moving far more to the recent, you've got, of course, the subprime mortgage crisis, which decimated a city like Detroit. Of course, the 2008 recession that we're still, recovering from. Detroit also had a particular issue with property tax overassessments. And so literally 100,000 properties that were driven into property tax foreclosure, not bank foreclosure, our county foreclosing on homes in our city. 1 in 4 properties in Detroit, owner-occupied properties driven into property tax foreclosure, that were being overassessed systematically by the city. All right, so this is a huge crisis, and we're part of a local coalition called the Coalition for Property Tax Justice, trying to tackle an issue like this. And so housing, economic development, and community organizing, are those 3 areas, for us. We just recently launched our first transitional home. We have some other sort of programmatic houses in the neighborhood as well. So as it pertains to the pandemic, of course, what we've seen is just more layers of sort of darkness added onto, what I described before in terms of those layers of like compounding sort of attacks on a neighborhood like ours. And so, of course, the real risk of the long-term risk of the pandemic is that it prolongs the disinvestment that we've seen in a neighborhood like ours. And so, to sum that up, when we started our work almost 7 years ago, Detroit, a well-funded organization here with alignment from city stakeholders, had just put out a document called the Detroit Future City Plan. It was a 50-year strategic planning framework for the city. And for our neighborhood, it listed it as what should be an ecological innovation zone. And what they basically said is attrition is too high in that neighborhood. It's not going to rebound. We're going to, over time, cut city services. We're going to slowly let it become this interesting place for, a controlled overgrowth and shallow rainwater collection pools on vacant lots. Interesting, green concepts, except for the fact that you've got tons of my neighbors here who said, we're not willing to just let our neighborhood, our community, go like that. We're not just accepting that city services are going to be cut off one day. We're going to reclaim these homes. We're going to plant new trees. We're going to work toward getting a new school one day, et cetera. And so, when we talk about the pandemic, and I'll start to close, Sister Ghazala, the risk is that type of disinvestment gets institutionalized even more than it already has. That cities, municipalities across the country that are tightening their budgets say, certain services can't be provided to neighborhoods like the one that Dream of Detroit operates in, right? That other neighborhoods have to be prioritized for whatever reason, because we're all sort of tightening our belts. That in a neighborhood like ours that couldn't even get dangerous houses demolished, that we'll be waiting even longer for that sort of basic sort of provision of city service. And so we know that there's been a moratorium in a lot of places on evictions. We're still, I think, at the front end of what that crisis is going to look like. And economists are saying that headed into 2022, we are likely looking at another mortgage foreclosure crisis. Perhaps not as big as the last time because we never recovered enough for it to be as big as the last time. But unfortunately, neighborhoods like ours and cities like Detroit are going to be the epicenter of that. And so we try to be one of the organizations, preparing, fighting back against, and again, putting development and organizing together to try to provide a solution. Thank you.
Yeah. And that bring, that I just want to point out here that it's so important for folks who are listening to understand the value of down ballot races and who we elect in local offices, because these issues are so local. All politics is local, but when we're looking at issues such as housing and everything that you've just talked about, the taxes, it's unbelievable that houses are being foreclosed because of their tax bills or things like that. Yeah. And so those are all in the control of your local politicians. And so it's so important that we know who we are electing in our communities, and not just ignoring it, because people tend to come out every 4 years and think we elected the president and everything is done, our job is done, we go home. Well, no, not really, because your vote is more important in the local election, if anything. Because that is really where you see the impact. And, we've seen in this pandemic that, federal government has let us down time and time again. And so we need to have strong leaders in our community, in our local, city councils, counties, and state legislation. So it's great that you're doing such amazing work there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, of course, when we talk about poverty, we can't really ignore climate change, because these two are so connected. And the next speaker that I'd like to invite is Jamia Adams. She works in the space of climate change. She works in advocacy and campaigns. And most recently, she has worked on Tom Steyer's campaign. So welcome, Jamia. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Assalamu alaikum, Ghazali. It's Jamia.
Jamia.
So nice to see you again. I know we met and spoke when I was working for Tom Steyer's presidential campaign during the Democratic primary. And currently I'm serving as the Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Tom Steyer's PAC. But I just want to thank you for the invitation today and for being able to speak to all the brothers and sisters during this time. I just want to wish peace and health and safety to all those who are participating on the panel, as well as all those who are listening. We are in a global pandemic, as you said, and this is really impacting our brothers and sisters who are experiencing poverty. And as the other speakers spoke about today, of actually doing things, I'm going to talk about how important it is for us as Muslims to tell our story, the narrative, and to be the researchers and to be the policy builders behind these programs that impact poverty here in the United States of America. I've been working on advocacy and digital media and communications for about 15 years, elevating the voices of the most marginalized people in the United States of America, communities who suffer from health disparities, environmental injustice, criminal injustice, and economic injustice. I produced media to elevate the awareness of the U.S. Census within the American Muslim Ummah, as well as elevating the voices of young dreamers here in California, which is where I am based, working to really lift up the voices and stories of our young people and their families who are fighting for immigrant rights. I want to talk today about just telling our own stories and really making an appeal that, yes, we are in an election season right now. You talked about those down ballot races. They are very key. With my work, I am working on both down ballot as well as the top of the ticket, because it's not just one or the other that's more important. They are equally the same, but our vote which I'm hoping that most of the audience has already cast their early vote if they're able to, and if they're not, they're able to participate on November 3rd. But our vote is just the beginning of our advocacy. Once we cast our vote, we have to hold our elected officials accountable to keep our communities clean, to keep our communities safe. You spoke about environmental injustice and poverty and how those are inexplicably linked. When we talk about polluted water and polluted air, many of these communities like Flint and Denmark, South Carolina, are in some of the poorest communities in our country. They're in communities that are predominantly communities of color, and corporations have taken the will to go and pollute these communities, and we're fighting back against it. We as Muslims, we as people of good conscience are really obligated to do this work and to fight back against those who may not be able to make their voices heard. Several groups have done studies about poverty, and you talked about ISP's data and whatnot before. And I just want to really elevate the idea of when we are studying poverty and the data, the context has to be there. When we talk about American Muslims, we are not a monolith. We're a very diverse community. And as Mark mentioned, and as Brother Umar mentioned, when we talk about poverty, oftentimes communities of color, particularly African Americans and our Latino brothers and sisters, are disproportionately impacted by poverty. And it's up to us as advocates and as people who are, in the Quran, it says, I made you into nations so that you can know each other. It's our obligation to work on behalf of our neighbor, whether it's our community or not. And so I just want to end there. I know that you have a lot of other speakers and I want them all to have their opportunity to speak, but I just want to thank the brothers and sisters who are doing such great work, the brother and sister who are doing work in Minnesota and Detroit and Los Angeles and around the country to uplift our brothers and sisters who are in poverty, and to know that with this pandemic, we are truly going to see inequities like we've never seen before. And the inequities that were present before are only going to be exacerbated due to the global pandemic. So it is our obligation to continue to do this work. And I am very proud to be in the company of such great advocates this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that. I think one of the reasons that Dustin and I decided that we wanted to do this is because we felt that neither party has an understanding of the deep diversity of the American Muslim community. And neither party understands the issues that impact the community. And so that was one of the reasons that we decided that we wanted to take this opportunity to frame our issues and to inspire people to organize after the election is over, because once the election is over, that is when our actual work is going to begin. Because like you said, we need to hold our elected officials accountable, and we need to be making sure it's an ongoing process. We have to be proactively engaged in politics at every level. And unless we do that, we're not going to be able to build a path, to our own political power, or to build our voice, which will have an impact on policies, that impact us here in our communities locally in this country. So thank you for sharing that. And I believe we have a couple of more speakers that have come on. The next speaker that I would like to bring on is Sister Samia Assad. She is a community organizer in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She has worked with the Poor People's Campaign, and she was part of the Women's March. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, Sister Samia.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me on, Ghazala, and what an honor to join such a panel of esteemed, honorable Muslims doing the good work. Thank you. I look forward to building with each one of you. Let me introduce myself a little more. I am Samia Assad, Palestinian American, mother of 9, grandmother to 5. That's the crown that I wear on my head every day. but I'm a human rights activist and organizer in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I sit as chair of multiple organizations, one of which is the Southwest Organizing Project, 40-year-old Chicano-led movement organization, and another organization by the name of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. Both work on many of the issues that my previous panelists have spoken about. I still am part of the National Women's March Board. I sit on as a board member, and I'm chair of the New Mexico Women's March. But I think some of the work that I did with the Poor People's Campaign was probably, as a Muslim American, it just hit a space that was like kind of empty for me, even though I do a lot of the good work that you're doing. Some of if I want to address some of the work that I'm doing right now is the masks. We have organized a coalition of different women, refugees, immigrants, indigenous women, to sew masks to supplement income. We've helped for food sustainability during this COVID crisis, to help farmers grow their food and deliver to the hungry. I've been part of Muslim organizing. I've been part of multiple campaigns on the human rights, and something Jamia was talking about as far as media and the narrative, and that's very dear to my heart. That's how I got into activism, and I understand the need for us to control the narrative and to create it, and to have access to the tools to create it. So that's a battle within its own. I also understand water and climate justice. New Mexico has one of the worst. We have nuclear waste. We build the nuclear bomb, and we actually want to dump all the waste in New Mexico. So it's home for that. And we've had the largest, most poisonous Kirtland jet fuel spill that we've been fighting for many, many years now, alongside the national causes, which I support as an activist. I want to touch on some of the issues that I worked on in the Poor People's Campaign, recognizing there's 140 million Americans who live in poverty. When I first went into that number, I was shocked, because the way they break it down, most media and sources don't break it down the way the Poor People Campaign has been able to do it, and bring impacted community to the forefront, many of whom are Muslim. But I don't think we've had much of a platform, and there needs to be a really deep-seated effort into organizing our Muslim community and a Muslim agenda. One thing we do address in the Poor People's Campaign, we recognize that poverty, like I said, 140 million people. You mentioned the number of 40% of Muslims are under the poverty line. That's higher than the national average. We don't talk about our community. We don't talk about the military industrial complex. If you want to talk about the budget of the military, they take 53 cents of every dollar, of every tax dollar. 15 cents go towards our poverty. Climate degradation, we talked about a little about that. We don't talk about poverty enough, and racism. So you have to have all of those connected to poverty. It's just not, poverty doesn't happen in an empty vacuum. Mm-hmm. And I think there has to be a firm, grounded understanding of how the poor in America are. What are the results on the conditions that have happened in communities that you see this? Most Muslims that come in as a first generation, second generation, my family's been here for 100 years. I was born in Dearborn, Michigan. A lot of the Muslim community that have not been here for more than 100 years come in as very privileged settlers. And it takes a long time before we're able to understand what the circumstances are of how people get poor. And we haven't made that connection. We've fallen into quite frankly, a white supremacist analysis of poverty and the otherness of the Black community, the Latino community, anyone who's failed in their eyes, while what has happened is that the system was built for you to not get out of that poverty or the horrible situation that you're in. My hope is to work with the like-minded community to build an organization that would be able to address this, or perhaps develop an agenda to act, a Muslim agenda for Muslim Americans, whether they are new or old, is to bridge that gap of understanding, to understand that poverty is something that has to do with the system that is run by this country. It's systemic. And a lot of times there's a failure for them to understand it, and they go on, and we still don't have the conversation about capitalism and how that fits into our beliefs, and what is the moral and ethical lens on that. So the work is ahead of us, and I would like to carry on a conversation with some of your the panelists, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's no doubt it's a systemic problem, and it's a failure of the systems. So before we start into our general discussion, I'd like to bring on our final panelist, who is a very dear friend of mine. He is Akeo Abdul Samad. He is the Iowa State representative, and he's also part of the Muslim Caucus Advisory Board, and he is the CEO and founder of Creative Visions Human Development Institute, which is a nonprofit organization he runs to support, folks in poverty and address all of these issues in his own community. So, Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Akeo.
Wa alaikum assalam. Sister Ghazala, how you doing? Also, in the introduction, you should have said that he is not an IT person, because it took me quite a time to download Google and do some things on my computer. But Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be part of this distinguished event and the panelists that are here. Let me be real short so you can move into segment 2. One of the things that we have to do when we talk about poverty, and we talked about pandemic, we have to go to root causes. That is one of the reasons why we've had problems in solving those issues, because we don't go to root causes. Poverty comes because of, as sister said it just a minute ago, because of racism. It comes because of, not having cost of living, not being able to have a livable wage. It comes because of sexism. It comes because we are living in a system that has been hypocritical from the time that it was established, and that's why we are now in a situation to where we're in a perpetual corrective mode to deal with the injustices that this country has perpetuated. And until we actually address even mental health issues and healthcare, we're going to have poverty. We have individuals that are homeless that don't want to be homeless, but can't get the medical help and mental health help that they need. We have individuals that don't want to live paycheck by paycheck, or not being able to get a paycheck, not because they don't want to, it's because they can't find a job that gives them a livable wage, or they have a job that's not paying them a livable wage, and it's not keeping up with the cost of living. So we have to begin as Muslims to be able to address the ills, of this country, and be able to address the ills of our neighborhood as our community. At Creative Visions, one of the things that we've seen, especially over the last 5 years, is that because we have a food pantry and we give out food, we've had a 263% increase of individuals needing to come to the food pantry. That increase also is those individuals that are living in the suburbs that no longer can afford, the luxuries that they had before, because of the economy, because of the pandemic. You know, when we look at the pandemic, again, as Sister pointed out, we're looking at the disparities. We're looking at several disparities, you know, levels of disparities. But when we look at African Americans, you know, and people of color who are dying more from the pandemic, you know, and being affected by that, is because of the health care. And the best example, and I'll step back from there, but the best example is that when you have the President of the United States who contracts the virus and then comes out in a short period of time, you know, we can see what good doctors do, access to medication can do, you know, access to the best health care, what it can do. Now, if that was allowing him to walk out of the hospital, to go back to work, to be able to campaign, just think if you and I and the other 99% of the people in this country had the same access to the health care that he had. That's criminal. That's criminal because this country can afford to have that. So, you know, again, I'm glad to be here. I know you want to move into phase 2, so I'll cut it off there. And inshallah, I'll be able to add some more, you know, to the discussion, you know, and as I learned from the other panelists. So thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I think we will have everybody on coming back. As we're getting all the panelists back, I just want to remind folks that are watching, please share your questions with us. Let us know if you want to join this campaign on poverty, participate, and organize an agenda beyond 2020 elections. Please share your thoughts on Facebook, and we will be sure to mention those as we continue the discussion. I mean, this is amazing work that you are all doing. So first of all, I want to applaud all of you because this is much needed work. And, if anything, this pandemic has shown us the extreme. It's not because of the pandemic that we're in this situation. The pandemic has just shown us, what's already out there and existing. And I think that it is highlighting all of these issues that have been there, that have been sidelined, or people are just not paying attention to it. Now they are, but this just didn't happen now because of the pandemic. It's been there for a long time. So I think my question to all of you is, and you guys can each respond to it. What should we be doing as a community, as folks who are listening to us? Because we can every year we give zakat. As American Muslims, we are very charitable. We want to help the poor and the needy. But like Omar said earlier, it's not just about feeding them. It's trying to create solutions. You have to have long-term solutions to eradicate these problems, to alleviate these problems. People have been, this has been happening for years and years and years. It's systemic. So what can we as citizens, as constituents, what can we do how can we exercise our agency to improve the lives of our community members? Can you share your thoughts with us on that?
One thing that I think we could do, and I mentioned it in my opening remarks, is encourage our young people to become those researchers, to bring their stories into this much needed policy work, to encourage them to look at those different career opportunities, and also to encourage our more affluent community members to look at some of these issues, particularly that are impacting folks that don't look like them, and really learn and understand the history of this country. We, sometimes when we come in as immigrants, we may understand the story that was spun of America and not really understand the true authentic story. We need to learn that authentic story and learn about the people who are here and see how we can build these inequity, and fill the gap of inequities that are existing among our communities.
Mark, would you like to? Go ahead.
I defer to brother. Okay, and then I'll defer to brother on the next one, inshallah. So, you know, I'll just say I appreciate that everyone has commented on how the nature of poverty in this country is systemic and that that's been a recurring theme. And I hope that that's, you know, one thing that folks take away from the conversation. You know, when we do our work here and we do a lot, not just in, you know, Detroit itself, but in the Metro Detroit area. And we do a lot to intentionally bridge, you know, both ethnic and class divides in the Muslim community. And a lot of times we refer to this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, where he says that, you know, the son of Adam has no right except in these three things, you know, a shelter to cover his head, a garment, and a piece of bread and water. And so, you know, for us, we look at that, and particularly that first statement about shelter, and this is a very clear articulation of housing as a human right, you know, from our Prophet, peace be upon him. And so when we talk about what Muslims should be able to unite around, housing is one of those things. And we encourage folks, and I'll close with this, we encourage people to see organizing as a form of service. You know, Muslims are absolutely inclined towards service, and we're happy to show up, you know, and help plug a gap at the end. But we really have to see the work that we can do empowering other people and focusing on having an upstream impact as important as, you know, again, those things that we can, those kind efforts we can take, you know, at the end outcome of a problem.
Brother Omar.
Yes. I'm looking at this in a couple of ways. Just like our brother Mark, he just reminded me of another story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he gave everybody a chance to carry the black stone to the Kaaba. So he basically put everybody on that one agenda. So for us here in America, in creating this agenda, it's going to help us keep our communities accountable. Keep each organizations that's on this call accountable, and have everybody moving towards that one vision for accountability here in the United States. Because I really feel like if we resolve our problems here in the United States, everything else would unravel. If we come together on having a voice here for lobbying, identify which PAC organization that's aligned with your community values that you want to support. Identify which community organization in your local area that you want to support. So and then let's take these values and interests to the next level of state and federal lobbying, because we have other groups who have strong lobbying. And now it's time for us to create this agenda. So now that we're not just going up there with a AB issue, we're going up to the state capitals with an agenda that's going to benefit not just one Muslim American, but Muslim American and Americans who are aligned to have the same issues.
If I may.
Yes.
And one of the things that we have to begin to think about is creating our strategic plan. Whenever you look at the city has a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Corporations have a 5-year plan, 10-year plan. You know, we need to come together, and I think we're all agreeing that we cannot continue to work in silos.
Mm-hmm.
Now have to come together and identify the lane that we're in, so that we can develop a strategic plan that will allow us to go to the capitals, to go to legislators, but to go to the community. Because this is our plan. You know, our plan is addressing the community and saying, all right, we have come together. We have part of this plan that will hopefully, inshallah, bring about systemic change. This part of this plan is a business plan, educational plan. You know, we have to bring this plan, the economic plan that includes the housing, that includes the criminal justice system, that includes the systems that are keeping that foot on our neck, you know, addressing the racism, the phobia, but we need to put it in the categories that we need, that individuals are working like that. You know, just like usually when we come together, and we talk about doing something, you know, if we're talking about education, we got business leaders, we got educational professionals, we got different individuals, but we need to let the educational people help develop this plan. Then we put the plan together. Now, does the plan work every city, every state? No, but it can be adapted, you know, for the area that you're in. But we need a blueprint to get started with. You know, we have a number of organizations on this call. We have a number of organizations across this country, from ISNA to AMA, you know, to you name it, you know, but are we coming together out of our silos to make this happen, to make the communities come together so the communities can come together and be functional, you know? And, you know, just like we have all different ethnicities in Islam, and the key is, are we utilizing that power that we bring to the table to not only develop a plan, but to be able to be a voice? That's what we have to begin to look at and begin to address. And that's what we need to bring to the people. And that's what we need to bring to each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not worry about who's heading it, but actually address it. And let's start putting that plan together.
Yeah. I think it's important. The first step is to address the issue, right? And I think in terms of that, Dustin has a question, and I want to just give him the opportunity to ask that question.
Yeah, and this has been a really beautiful panel, and that's part of exactly what you're talking about is part of the reason why we founded the Center for Global Muslim Life this year in 2020 in the midst of this pandemic, is that we as a Muslim community have to get out of this constant reactionary state that we've been in. How do we have a strategic, future-oriented vision for our world? And we use that term global Muslim life for a reason. It's not to say we're not rooted in the United States. It's to say that it's okay for us to have a global identity and an identity where we can love each other and love the Ummah and love Muslims around the world. Because if we're 1/4 of humanity right now, and will become, as Pew says, 1/3 of humanity by 2070, that means that Muslims have to lead in humanity to transform our world. And so, but I love this panel. It's really beautiful. You all are doing such incredible work, mashallah. But I wanted to think real quickly then about that strategic question. Unfortunately, so much of the American Muslim community has this bourgeoisie identity, and this where we center really bourgeoisie politics, right? And that we're talking about taxes and some of these things, and as our primary issue. And so that's how we end up with Muslims for Trump, et cetera, unfortunately. But how do we shift the narrative within the Muslim community about poverty, where we're centering working class voices, where we're centering the majority of our community and the work that you all are doing? Because part of creating that future, and a big part of the work that we do, is around narrative change. So I just wanted you all with your beautiful perspectives to think about that, of how do we change the narrative about who actually is at the center of our community, and especially within this idea of thinking about building a political agenda for 2021. That's why we put poverty number one issue for our community in the United States, right? That's what we were thinking about. So if anybody would like to respond to that.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, we need to embrace the diversity of our community. African American Muslims are the majority of American Muslims in United States, and they are highly impacted by poverty and all of these issues that we're talking about. So I think that we have to include that, because we have to understand our diversity is what makes us more powerful. It's an asset that we have, so we need to embrace that diversity. So with that, who wants to respond to? Yes.
This is a good question.
If I could jump in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's a good question. How can we begin to shift the conversation, becoming going from monolithic to these decentralized communities and becoming one voice? Recently, I've been able to earn a contract with Muslim Public Affairs Council to create an African American Insight Council within their infrastructure. And what this council is going to do is going to help increase impacts capacity and understanding a broader sense of what community is. So it'll affect their policy changes, and it'll affect, their policy work, and it'll affect the way they look at how their policies will support the community, especially the human securities situation. So definitely, I'm hoping that this agenda or even this council sparks the agitation for the conversation to begin. For this conversation to ignite those minds who are willing to come to the table. So it's like we've all been given the job of Noah alayhi salam. Let's build this ark to get those who want to come on board.
I just wanted to say something, and all the panelists have said this. I think our youth are really our future, aren't they? Really need to involve our youth. When I look at the amount of work that has been done in the Minneapolis Sanctuary movement in just the last 3 or 4 months, the people who have been advocates of the unhoused and unsheltered individuals have been young volunteers who have dedicated hours of their time to make this happen. They have been advocates for the individuals. They have done advocacy and reached out to their elected officials. They've tried to make them accountable. And I think as Muslims, it's very important for us to make sure that our youth are a part of this process, and they can make a huge impact. As an immigrant myself, I know one of the brothers mentioned that some of us tend to live in this bubble, and we are privileged. The way we have come, we are privileged. But I think our children and our youth are really going to make a big impact. And for them to be involved in this process from the very beginning is, I feel, going to make a huge change.
The one thing I wanted to just add is that, one of the challenges I've seen for the immigrant population is that we come and we carry the baggage and we still remain connected to our own culture. So we try to make all our efforts advocating for the problems back home. We send our donations back home. What we need to remember is that Islam came to establish justice in whatever society you're living in. And if we are living in this society, our fundamental responsibility is to establish justice over here. And the injustice that is being done to the Black population here, to the Native population, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, whoever they are, just as a community, we need to start building at a large scale organizations and institutions that continue to advocate for that and to continue to build those relationships with our communities to establish justice. And I think when we do that, then we really make a strong statement that we are here not just as immigrants, but we are here as citizens of this community. We are here to make a change, because we talk about Islam having the answer to all the problems of the West. If we truly believe that, then let's start implementing that at a larger scale, and not disconnect ourselves from where we come from, but begin to realize that the population over here of Muslims, that no matter what color or what ethnicity they come from, they are our brothers and sisters, and we need to remain connected with them.
Yeah, that goes to the point, want what you want for yourself, want for your brother, your neighbor, and your friend. So when you're giving zakat and charity, a lot of people tend to think that they have to send it back home, because obviously, yes, there's lots of issues around the world, but you also have to, that's one of the criteria, right, to give it locally, is so that you can improve humanity in your own community. You can improve the lives of the people that are living around you. So that was a good point that you made there, brother Dr. Murad. Sister Samia.
Sister Samia, I know. Yeah, Samia. Go ahead, sister. I know you were trying to speak before.
Yes, hi.
Samia?
I wanted to comment on the previous question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to answer on the previous question, but some of my brothers from the Black community, and I have to say this, and my sister from the Black community, they know what the issues are. You have to go to the community suffering the most. You have to empower and uplift the voices that are impacted the most. So you know the knowledge is there. They have the answers to the needs on the ground. I want to say a few words about my experience as a DNC delegate at the Democratic Convention. Like I said, I'm an American Palestinian, and it was a demoralizing experience for me because I had to deal with the platform, but I also had a firsthand experience with some of the Muslim Americans at that level, delegates, lobbyists, you name it. And it was disheartening to see the power grabs, the privilege, the disconnect that they have with their communities. I just left adamant about building a platform that is unwavering in its commitment to transparency and truth-telling, accountability, and really stick to the narrative of the community, unapologetic in our demands for our Muslim community. So I think anything we move forward in must be informed by the grassroots and the people on the ground. We must empower and uplift voices. We must address the issues of systemic racism. For us as Muslims to understand what we need to do on a national level to organize, we need to educate our communities on that. It can't be just us community organizers. We have to get to the ammos and aunties who fund a lot of, and we give, Muslims give, they give a lot, but they have to understand how to give and who to give. And not everybody who's just out there to make a name for themselves, just grab, the lion's share of funding instead of giving it to the most impacted communities. So that organizing has to happen ASAP. We have no choice because COVID has hit us hard. And come this election, we will be among the first group of people that will be impacted. 100% the Muslim and immigrant community will be targeted if Trump wins. Regardless if Trump doesn't win, the Muslim woman on the street's going to be targeted. I watch out, and I'm in a pretty good area in Albuquerque. I have to watch where I am because I'm a hijabi woman, and their attacks are very real. So the attacks on us are going to be very real, and also poverty will impact us like nothing before. So thank you. I'd like to pass it on to somebody else.
I'd happy to comment really briefly on that question. First of all, may Allah protect Sister Samia and all of our sisters and all of our community. In terms of shifting the narrative, I would say getting our message out there, is the first piece. And so I appreciate, venues, platforms like this where, a group of folks can come and talk about, systemic issues and how we solve them. So getting the message out is number one, and not being afraid to produce content to get the message out. I know our brother Destin is an expert in content production. Number two, casting a wide net, spreading that as far as it will go. Number three, I'm going to say two kind of conflicting things. After you cast that wide net, at least in our experience, we've been willing to accept that some people are going to fall through that net, or the net isn't going to reach everyone. And when this work is urgent, and we want to constantly remind ourselves that it's urgent, and we're not necessarily waiting on everyone. So I appreciate what Sister Samia was saying, and I feel like my experience says to me that I'm not going to convince every wealthy uncle who has made it in this dunya doing things his way, floating the candidates that he supports, getting the access that he wants. I'm not necessarily going to show up and convince every single one of them, and we've accepted that. The flip side of that is that there's always that we are people who believe in redemption, right? And there's always an opportunity for people to grow, for people to change perspective. We remember that Malcolm told us, you have to remember that there was a time when you didn't know what you know today, right? And we have to humble ourselves and give an opportunity for everybody to come into, these movements that we're trying to build. And lastly, I'll just say, we need to be as intentional building the next generation of our communities as we were with these, largely like relationship and sort of like historical sort of like family and place-based settlements that we created initially, right? And this next generation, a lot of times what happens is with the Muslim community in various places, you saw sort of a Black Muslim community or very, very, very early immigrant Muslim community. Then you see later immigrant Muslim community arrive en masse in proximity to that Black community. And then within that next generation, follow that American dream right out into suburbia where Black folks haven't had access, et cetera, and abandon the communal link that we could have had, right? So to Sister Ghazala's point earlier, I honestly don't believe that diversity is an asset unless we make it one, right? Yeah. Because to date, we haven't actually made reality of Malcolm's statement that Islam could solve the race problem in America. We haven't exemplified, our unity through our diversity, unfortunately, as a Muslim community. So building intentional communities after casting that wide net with the message that we're trying to bring to the people.
Yeah, intentionality is, I think it's all about that. And you have to be intentional in this moment. In the history of this country, in the history of this whole global environment that we're living in. Brother Akeo, do you have any comments as we come to we're like at 6:13, we've run a little bit over, but we want to just hear some closing remarks.
Well, if
I can answer just 30 seconds.
Please, go ahead, sister.
If you don't mind, I just want to say one thing. I want you to know, Mark, I would never put the burden on the Black community to do the work for the Muslim community. That's what us as privileged settlers on this land have to do. The rest of the Muslim community have to speak, and that's our burden, and we have to rise to that responsibility.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sister.
Historically, we see where oppression has taken place in this country. We have seen the creation of fear that was placed, especially after 9/11 and before then, and has been ongoing. We have seen the disrespect of women. We have seen the issues that have continued to develop until we actually, and I want to go back to, I believe, Brother Dustin that said, we have to start thinking outside the box. We can't use the same methods that have constantly been used. What we're seeing now after the George Floyd movement, especially with young people from all nationalities, all different religions come together. Remember, is just a stem, comes from the struggles that we've seen with Dr. King, comes from what we saw, the struggles with Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where individuals were coming together with a plan to deal, but it also comes from watching Brother Malcolm be killed because he went globally, watching Dr. King get killed because he went globally. We have to be able to start thinking outside the box, not only go globally, but we need to identify historically, where we have come from, because we keep running down this same path, and we have to get off this path so that we end up with cosmetic changes instead of systemic changes. So now comes the time that, not only do we reach out globally, and not only do we deal with the issues with the Islamic community domestically, but we actually now stand up, and I think the sister said earlier, if I didn't, I hope I'm not misquoting, we cannot be apologetic about where we're at today in our stands that we're taking. We cannot be apologetic for being Muslim. We cannot be apologetic for being Black and wanting justice. We cannot be apologetic for being Latino and wanting justice. If we're talking about justice, then are we willing to stand up to create the processes to get that justice? And so let me close with that, because I'm really passionate about this. That's why I applaud the Muslim Caucus, because we have to go into the political arena, and we have to go in there with such passion, because right is on our side. We have to go in with the Muslim Caucus with being so much involved, not only with the personal, with the individual going in, but we have economically, we have to support the Muslim Caucus. We have to support the PAC. We have to begin holding politicians accountable. You know, I don't care if you're Muslim, we got to hold you accountable. But we also have to hold society accountable. We have a government to hold accountable. We have communities to hold accountable. And that's where we're at today. So I'm hoping this is a stimulus to continue conversation, but action, you know, because most of the people on this call I'm meeting for the first time. Some I have seen on other panels. I say, Alhamdulillah, for all the work that you're doing. But now, how do I reach out to you so that I know what you're doing, you know what I'm doing, and see where we can work together to do that? And we use the Muslim Caucus as the focal point, as a catalyst to do that, Alhamdulillah.
Indeed. Thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better. I think that is the whole point, right? In 1 hour, there is no way we can unpack this deep issue, the deep-rooted issue of poverty, which is so connected to all of the inequities that we see, injustices that we see in our communities. But inshallah, this is just the first step, right? And so after the election, our goal is, like Dustin mentioned, you know, we want to build a Muslim agenda for 2021 and 2022 and beyond, where we are collaborating, not working in silos anymore, because that does not bring us success. And we need to be working together. We will be stronger when we do that. And so we can start, and it all begins at a grassroots level. We have to do grassroots level organizing and work. So together with all of you, we hope to build that agenda. We will continue these conversations and have more broader forums, you know, around this issue especially, and all the other issues that we're going to be talking about each night. But after the elections, we will come back to all of you. We'll, inshallah, form a committee and start a strategic plan, be intentional and strategic in our goals and objectives, because we are all in different parts of the country. And so I think together we can make a greater impact.
Alhamdulillah.
Brother Omar?
Yeah, thank you everyone who was on this panel. I want to say, whenever you're in Los Angeles, please check in with me. I'm your ambassador here. So please check in with me. I'm located at Isla, LA. And we are a warm, vibrant community. So whatever time you want to get down, welcome to LA. You know,
Can I just testify? I got my first trip to LA. I swear, Brother Omar was the first person I met at Islam. My first trip there, mashallah, like 4 or 5 years ago. So the brother is speaking absolute truth. And likewise, if any of you and the viewers come through Detroit, please check us out at Dream of Detroit in the Muslim Center. We'd love to see you, inshallah.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. This has been an amazing panel. We look forward to reconnecting with you after the election. Dustin?
Yeah, well, first, does anyone, any other final closing thoughts? Jamia, anyone just want to say goodbye, anything?
I did want to thank Brother Aiko Abdul Samad, because I actually was campaigning in Iowa and took refuge in Creative Vision. So it was warm and it was 19 degrees. I just want to thank you, brother, for having that beautiful pantry in the middle of the community, serving the community in the way that you do. Thank you.
Yeah, I've experienced that. Yeah.
Mr. Ghazala,
it's nice to know I have across America. Thank you.
Yes.
No, I just asked Sister Ghazala, can you connect us?
Yes, we will. We are going to connect it. This is the whole purpose of these forums. It's not just to come and talk here today and to go away, but this is just the first step in the building block of what our agenda, our organizing work, and everything that we will have to do that comes after the election. Our work is going to begin after November 3rd, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah, real quick, some housekeeping
Thank
notes.
you,
So,
Jazakumullah khair.
yeah, thank you all again. We'll be back tomorrow with a panel on race and white supremacy in the United States and Islamophobia around the world. Real quickly, you can support the Muslim Caucus at the below link that we'll also put in the comments, and the Center for Global Muslim Life. We have a program going on right now called the Beyond Border Digital Media Academy, focused at organizations and individuals to help you tell your story, because now that everybody suddenly is online, we all have to get really good at it. So with that, we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
Wa alaikum